Hello, everyone, and welcome to the International Biochar Initiative webinar, a verified biochar-based solution for the reduction of cadmium uptake in cacao. My name is Caroline Pete. I will be facilitating this webinar. Before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. You should already be able to hear me and see the share screen. If you're hearing echoes or your sound quality is bad, you can use the audio functions in the GoToWebinar toolbar that's usually on the right side of your screen. If you still have any trouble, you can send the organizers a message using the chat feature. And don't worry, we are also recording this webinar. The recording and the slides will be available within the next few days for all registrants and IBI members. If you have a question, you can ask questions at any time using the questions pod in that panel, and we will handle all of the questions after the presentation today. So thank you all for joining, and I'm going to hand it off to our moderator, Kathleen Draper, to take you through the great presentation we have today. Kathleen, please take it away.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our discussion on using biochar to immobilize heavy metals. I hope you're all staying safe and wearing a biochar mask to fend off corona. Actually, if anybody's found a biochar mask, please let me know. For those of you joining us for the first time today, we're glad you're here. The International Biochar Initiative has been hosting webinars on a wide variety of topics for several years. All of these are recorded and archived on our website and are free to all our members. These webinars are one way that we try to connect our broad range of stakeholders, including researchers, biochar entrepreneurs, biomass generators, policymakers, customers, and the investment community. Next slide. I first met our guest speaker a few years ago when I visited the Biochar for Sustainable Soils project in Peru. Most of our time was spent talking about improving yield in maize and coffee, but what intrigued me even more at the time was some discussions about the impact of the vast amount of mining going on in Peru on soils and crops, and what role biochar might play in improving food safety. Dr. Brenton Ladd has since joined the IBI board, and I've been bugging him for a while now to tell more people about some of the truly great results that they've had using biochar to reduce cadmium uptake. For me, this is a market that should be given much more attention, as there are few other viable options. Farmers face economic disaster when new food safety regulations are rolled out. Brenton is one of only a few folks that I know in the biochar world that has a combination of both academic and commercial experience when it comes to biochar. But I'll leave it to Brenton to tell you more about his problem and solution down there in Peru. Brenton, it's all yours.
Thanks. Okay, so I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about how we got here. And the truth is that it's been a long road, and I've had the good luck to collaborate with a lot of people. So the people I've put here are some of the key collaborators that I've got in the country, and who have been involved with the trials that I'm going to describe today, where we've run basically enormous agronomic trials to demonstrate the efficacy of biochar as a means to immobilize cadmium in chocolate orchards. And the reason for this is because the EU recently established a new limit for the amount of cadmium that's permissible in chocolate products. So beginning in 2019, there was a massive hit to the Peruvian industry, because the majority of the cacao that we produce here in Peru is native fine aroma cacao that's all destined for the European market, where they produce high quality chocolate. So some of the important people are Rachel Atkinson, Everett Thomas from Biodiversity International, Julio Alegre from La Molina. I put Karina Arango here. She's a thesis student who I'd like to thank publicly now. She's, for the last 2 years, she's been doing an undergraduate thesis project where she's been going to the north and measuring yield in the cacao biochar cadmium experiment we've had running in the north. Freddy Llovera is from the Cooperative Norandino in the north of Peru. who's been instrumental for us in terms of the logistics on the ground, running the experiment, also the expansion. Stephanie Lorette, the Mola, is another thesis student who's been really helpful to me here. Niels Borchardt is a long-time collaborator. And last of all, I put Rui Anaya de la Rosa et al. And the et al. I put Rui's name there because he was the leader of the B4SS project, which involved a large number of collaborators, among them Lucas Van Swyten, Annette Cowie, Stephen Joseph, all of whom have come to visit me in Peru, have provided mentoring, good advice, and were instrumental in being in a position to be able to achieve the results that that I'm going to present today. Next, please. Okay, so in Peru, we've been working in a few different zones. I've listed some places here. There's a photo of Rui giving a present of a sack of biochar to coffee farmers in the Peruvian highlands. So yeah, we've worked basically in Pachacamac, which is on the southern fringe of Lima. Also, we've been working in San Ramon and Sartipo, where the cultivation of coffee and cacao is important. And most recently, we've been working in Piura in the north of Peru, where there's significant problems with contamination of cadmium in the soils. The next, please. So this photo here shows our pilot scale production plant or research facility that we have on the southern fringe of Lima in a place called the Pachacamac Valley. This was in the early days, where you can see we've got Contiquis running. We've constructed a batch pyrolyzer based on a design from Stephen Joseph, and it shows also the feedstock with which we work, which is basically municipal green waste. Next one, please. So the basic idea that we've got is to take this municipal green waste. You can see in the top left-hand corner, there's a municipality truck that looks like it's 50 years old, falling to pieces. So we've been receiving this municipal green waste from a local government here on the southern fringe of Lima. We take that, we turn it into biochar, and then the idea is that we use it in applications like gardening, or put my garden here, or in agriculture. And for me, this is critical. Something that we a conclusion that we arrived at during the implementation of the B4SS project, that the production of biochar needs to use sustainable feedstocks. It needs to use waste streams of biomass. And here in Lima, we've got an excellent opportunity to pioneer that, because Lima's a mega city and it's quite poor, and the government doesn't have a lot of resources. The local governments don't have much resources. So per month, we're producing around about 2,500 tons of municipal green waste. I'm talking about branches that you obtain from pruning street trees and trees in urban parks. And most of this waste stream was just headed for landfill, or it was ending up in clandestine landfills where it was just burned, so that to get rid of it as cheap as possibly. So things are changing in Peru. There's a new law for management of organic waste streams, or solid waste in general. But yeah, there's an enormous amount of biomass feedstock that's not being used. Anyway, next slide, please. Yeah, I think we can skip this one. Most people should be familiar with this. I probably should have taken that one out. Sorry, next. Okay, so I want to emphasize that the work we've been doing on cadmium, using biochar to limit cadmium uptake in cacao, it comes at the end of a long road. I've been working on biochar for over a decade now, and we've done a lot of different things that have been important in terms of developing our knowledge and our experience, and but haven't necessarily led to the, how can we say, yeah, the generalized and widespread use of biochar in applications like mining or the soil remediation for mining or in agriculture that would enable biochar to fulfill its role of achieving a climate change scale, or a change in practice, which would be climate change scale relevant. So we've done different things. We've done a lot of work testing different technologies for biochar production. We've also, especially as part of the B4SS, we've worked on developing different biochar formulas, and we've also been working to disseminate like the knowledge that we've generated, and also the knowledge that other scientists have been generating in other countries. Next, please. So, yeah, just quickly, I wanted to talk about some of the technologies we've used. I mean, probably like most of you, when we first started, we were using artisanal technologies like these T-Lud stoves fabricated out of metal cylinders. We've used charcoal kilns. Next. We've also experimented with biochar stoves that we thought might be a viable replacement for the traditional cook stoves that people use in the jungle here. I'll put one example of this. This didn't work so well for us, but we did try it. Next, please. And then we've also built a reactor which is a little bit more advanced. As you can see, this is a batch pyrolyzer. It's based on a design from Stephen Joseph. It's a closed reactor. It's got tubes to be so that we can control airflow in the bottom half and the top half of the oven independently, and control emissions. Next, please. And also we've been working with Contikis. Next. And we've also copied this strategy. This is Gerard Cornelissen from the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute, also involved in the B4SS project, and he's made a Kontiki in the ground. So we've done all of this, and I just want to say that in terms of technology, I think I hear a lot about, you know, like a need for state-of-the-art reactors, and whilst I agree with this, I also think that the generation of organic waste is a really heterogeneous phenomenon, and while we're in this beginning stage of trying to get biochar to known amongst agriculturalists, amongst miners, people that are going to actually use it, there's no one technology that's most appropriate. I mean, in different contexts, I think different technologies are important. Next. So as well, for the B4SS project, a lot of what we did was we were trying to demonstrate, we were trying to develop a formula of biochar and demonstrate an application of biochar that would be attractive to farmers. So one of the things that we did was focus heavily on the use efficiency of already used fertilizers. So in this graph, basically what we demonstrate is that by combining biochar with chemical fertilizers like urea, we were able to increase the production or the yield of maize. Next. And this could increase profitability. And I share this because we put an enormous amount of work into generating the formulations of biochar that we used in these experiments, and then writing up these experiments, and then doing the economic analyses. And in the end, this was like a dead end for us, because the farmers are quite conservative in terms of what they're willing to try and what they're willing to use. And if the fact that we could demonstrate that the biochar could increase the use efficiency of chemical fertilizers and reduce their costs really didn't set their imaginations on fire. And so, although we've demonstrated a clear economic advantage to using it, this didn't work for us. So I think basically starting 3 years ago, we implemented another strategy, and that was to focus on using biochar for the remediation of soils contaminated with heavy metals. Next, please. Yeah, I think we can skip this one as well. This is just more nitrogen fertilization stuff. Sorry. Next. Okay. Yeah. Also, I just wanted to let you know that on the IBI website, we've produced a number of videos, short videos, which are basically best practice guides. These were produced for the B4SS, and this was part of our communication strategy to share the knowledge that we generated during that project. So yeah, these videos in Spanish, but they do have English subtitles, and it's a resource that's there on the IBI website if anyone is interested. Please, next. Okay, so after all of this work on experimenting with different technologies, experimenting with different formulations of biochar, and looking at trying to demonstrate the benefit of biochar in terms of agronomy and fertilizer use efficiency, we changed tact and we started focusing on the contamination of cadmium, the contamination of cacao orchards with cadmium, a heavy metal called cadmium, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of the seminar, is a threat to the Peruvian cacao industry. So this is a map of cadmium content in the cacao beans in Peru. So these little dots on the map are basically the cacao growing regions of Peru. I should also mention that this map was produced by my colleague Rachel Atkinson at Universidad International, and so you can see in the north of the country and in the center of the country we have quite high levels of cadmium in cacao. So just to put this in perspective, the new limit for cadmium content in cacao established by the European Union is 0.8. So in basically half of the extension of the cacao crop in Peru, we have a serious problem, and the industry here is a meltdown because there really is no other market for this fine grain, fine aroma cacao that we produce here. Next, please. So yeah, this is 2 or 3 years ago, we won a new grant to work on this problem of cacao content in, cadmium content in cacao. And so this project was financed by the Peruvian government, an organization called Innovate, and this basically here just shows the cacao orchard in where we started in the north. So in the top left, you can see we've applied a massive dose of biochar to an already established cacao tree, and in the bottom is some of the key collaborators on this experiment. Below me is Rachel Atkinson from Bioversity. To our right is Freddie O'Vera from the Cooperative Norandino, and the other person is Stefania, my thesis student and collaborator on everything. And the map shows basically the distribution of treatments in this experiment that we set up. Next, please. So this experiment was enormous. It was, you can see this is a map of the experiment that we set up in Piura 2 or 3 years ago in the north of Peru, and every one of these little squares is a different replicate, different treatment, and each one of the numbers within the boxes is an individual tree. So the experiment's it's big. It's like we've amended the soil of over 1,200 trees, established trees in this cacao orchard. But I think more importantly, we've not only have we measured the effect of biochar, we've measured biochar applied in different ways. You can see in the photo that I've attached to this slide, where we're basically top dressing the biochar, and it's a massive dose. Also, we used micro doses of biochar combined with chemical fertilizers, and we also, in this experiment, not only did we have biochars and controls, we also incorporated other soil amendments that were being promoted by the industry, the fertilizer industry here in Peru, as potential solutions to the problem of cadmium in cacao. So it's got a really strong comparative element, this experiment. And so basically what we did is we applied these different soil amendments, biochar, a silicate-based fertilizer called Humisil, a microbiological product, which is called levadura here, which is basically yeast in English. So we applied all these different soil amendments, and then we measured the content of cadmium in the cacao grains produced by all of these 1,260 trees that you see mapped here in this figure. Next, please. And so this is just a slide just to give you an idea of the scale of the experiment. This is by no means all of the samples that we collected, but you can see that we've collected seeds from individual trees from a really large number of trees. So there's an enormous amount of replication in this experiment, and I feel blessed to have had the opportunity to be involved with it. Next, please. So these are the results. So in this graph, basically we've got on the y-axis we've got the percent change in the cadmium content of cacao beans 6 months after applying the different treatments. And you can see, so as you would expect, in the control treatment, there's no change in the cadmium content of the cacao beans. When you add fertilizer, there's a slight reduction, and this makes sense to some degree because if the plant's well nourished, it doesn't need to go exploring throughout the whole soil profile in search of nutrients. So maybe this is the reason for limited uptake of cadmium when chemical fertilizers apply. In the next column, we've got Humisil, which is a silicate-based fertilizer, which had basically no effect. And then next is a biochar, which is quite variable, but it was a significant reduction. And then the last column is the yeast treatment, which also had no effect. I should also mention that the yeast had a really strong effect on the productivity of the trees. So we've got 2 years of yield data now from this cacao orchard, and yeah, although it didn't limit cadmium uptake, yeast was effective at increasing yield in the cacao. Next, please. So in terms of, as I mentioned, with the biochar, we had lots of different treatments. We had massive applications, basically a dose response type experiment where we applied 0, 7, 15, 30, and 60 kilograms of biochar per tree, and this was top dressed. These treatments basically were not very effective. We think because, as you can see below, the biochar took time to get incorporated into the soil. Then we had another series of biochar treatments, these ones here, where we applied micro doses of biochar, but we combined this biochar with chemical fertilizer. And this was dug into the soil following the normal farmer practice for the application of chemical fertilizers. And when we did this, there was a significant a reduction in the absorption of cadmium by the cacao plant. So in the middle column, where we've basically dropped the level of chemical fertilization back to about exactly half the recommended rate for cacao, and we've substituted in biochar. And when we do this, we see like a 50 to 80% reduction in the absorption of the of cadmium by cacao. Next, please. As mentioned, our thesis student Karina has been working solidly over the last 2 years. They're collecting yield data from the cacao plantation where we implemented this experiment, and now we have data on yield. And the first thing I wanted to say is that, so the blanco here probably should say control. I'll put it in Spanish. I haven't changed it. The fertilization is synthetic is chemical fertilizer, and then we've got the silicate fertilizer. We've got biochar. So thanks to this 2 years of going out into the field and every couple of months collecting yield data, we can now say that there's a couple of things that stand out. The first is that the effect of biochar on yield in cacao is basically equivalent to the effect that you see by applying synthetic chemical fertilizers. And the other thing is that the advantage with biochar is that in addition to increasing yield, it limits cadmium uptake. So there's a clear economic advantage, we think, now to the use of biochar instead of chemical fertilizer. And where I think the key players in the cacao industry are beginning to see that, and we're seeing an expansion of the field verification of this experiment that I've just described to the rest of the cadmium affected areas for cacao cultivation in Peru. So to conclude, it's been a long road. We've done a lot of stuff that hasn't resulted in immediate, immediate results in terms of bringing biochar application and production and use to scale. But I think it's been important. All of that experience, all of the experience that we've gained, experimenting with technology, experimenting with the use of biochar to increase nutrient use efficiency has been important, and it's enabled us to get here. And I'm extremely optimistic that we've, as Hans-Peter Schmidt has said, that we found a Trojan horse that is going to bring biochar out of academia into the mainstream, where it's used in agriculture, in soil remediation, and where it can have a climate change relevant impact. Thank you.
Sorry, my mute button wasn't going off. So Brenton, we had another probably half hour scheduled for you to talk. There are questions coming in, but I'm wondering if you could kind of describe the different biochars you may have tested and talk about some of the characteristics that are relevant for this. And the other thing is, when I was there, you showed me this very low-tech way of making iron water, and I'm wondering if you're still doing that sort of thing, if it helps in this particular application.
Yeah, so maybe we're not doing that anymore. Definitely we're not doing that. There's too many problems with contamination of other metals. I mean, metals are not, I mean, they're composite products that have got different stuff in them. So yeah, we've tested the water from this. It's not a good idea. This is not done anymore. In terms of formulation, we've just written an article on formulation of biochars for heavy metal immobilization. Maybe we could share that article if people are interested in that.
Yeah, if you send us the link, we'll include that in the email that goes out with the link to this webinar.
Great.
So is most of what you're producing for the cadmium immobilization from the green waste?
Yes, yeah, definitely. The lion's share. Also, in addition to producing biochar for cadmium immobilization in Cacao, we're also beginning production for a new organic asparagus plantation in the north of Peru that's going to be established on sandy soil, so it's going to be more for water retention.
Yes, when I visited, I guess I didn't realize how much of Peru is quite desert-like. So I know water is a key criteria of choosing the equipment. So you don't want to have to use too much water. So I noticed when you used a Kontiki, you did a kind of reverse burn, which, is top down versus bottom up. And you used, if I recall, chicken manure to quench it or to snuff it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you're still doing it? Or is there anything else in the biochar when it's just the biochar?
Yeah, no, it needs to be a mix of municipal green waste and manure. Definitely.
Okay, let me just, there were some pretty technical questions, but I think you may have answered some of these after the questions were posted. One was about, was biochar simply applied to the soil surface? how much was lost to wildlife consumption or maybe erosion?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think yeah, who was the questioner? Just out of curiosity.
Chris Bachman.
Hey, g'day, Chris. Yeah, I think it's a good question, Chris. So yeah, I mean, we did try top dressing, but the biochar application method that worked best was based on the normal farmer practice. And what they do basically is take a crowbar and they make a little hole in the soil, and then they drop the chemical fertilizer in there. So that's basically, and then they close it back up. So that's basically what we did with the biochar fertilizer combinations. We dug it into the soil. I mean, when you're talking about micro rates of application, it's possible to make a little hole in the soil. I mean, when we're talking about, you know, applications of 60 kilos per tree, you can't dig it into the soil because you're damming the root systems. But yeah, when we're talking about micro, you know, 1 kilo per tree, it's entirely possible to dig it in. And when we did that, it was much more effective and instantaneously.
So can you talk maybe a little bit about the economics in terms of, you know, the yield plus reduction in fertilizer costs, plus being able to retain or get back into the European market once the levels are appropriate?
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to, but we're sort of working on that at the moment. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's important. It's important, and we're working towards that. But I'm still trying to pull all the data together. I mean, but yeah, I mean, yeah, we've advanced, but I'm not ready yet to share all that like analysis with the world. I mean, I want to work on it a bit more, but it looks good. My draft.
Good. This is a similar question to the first one. In the experimental design map with 1,260 trees, what's the application rate per tree? How much labor would it take per tree? And I think you already discussed how deep is the top dressing.
Yeah. I mean, the experiment was extremely labor intensive, and it still is, because we've got individual trees tagged, and you know, we've been following what happens with them, and it's been extended for another, you know, I mean, it's ongoing, the experiment, and it didn't finish when the first round of funding ran out. I mean, it's my colleagues at Biodiversity have been really successful at getting additional funds to keep it all rolling. But in terms of cost of application, I mean, because we've expanded from what we've done in Pura, we know that we can, you know, the application rates can be tiny. I mean, we're talking about like a kilo per tree per year, and it can be piggybacked onto the normal fertilization program that the chocolate grower, cacao growers are implementing. So in terms of cost, I mean, because it's integrated in what they're already doing, I mean, it's manageable. And then when you talk about, you know, the fact that, I mean, there might be like a 30% reduction. I mean, if they can't sell to the European, if the cooperatives can't sell the chocolate, the cacao produced to the European Union, it needs to get dumped on the local Peruvian market or on the US market. And the price they receive is about 30% lower. So there's a big economic hit from not addressing this cadmium issue.
So another question was on the characterization of the raw biochar. Is there anything you want to share on that?
Like what?
Like pH probably, or carbon content, or things that are relevant to immobilizing cadmium.
Yeah, so I've just sent a link through to the article. So, I mean, everything we've done is based on basically that literature review, that quantitative analysis of the literature we've done. I mean, this is, you know, I think it's all pretty clear in this article. I would refer the person that put the question to have a look at it. And if they've got any questions, they can get back to me, write me an email. But the starting point would be that article.
Okay. Question, is the yield slide after biochar? Do we have pre-biochar data to document increases?
Yeah, we do.
Wasn't that your control, I think?
Yeah, I mean, the control's at the same time without any fertilizer application. So, but I mean, like the thing that stands out with that graph for me is the extremely low yields of cacao. But this is not like a genetically selected cultivar of cacao. This is fine aroma cacao, a native variety. It's called Porcelina or Blanco here in Peru. So yeah, I mean, it's not ultra productive. It's not an ultra productive variety, but it's yeah. I mean, the yields, but yeah, the quality of the beans that come off the plants is exceptional.
Okay, how is biochar scientifically and or chemically actually reducing cadmium in the cacao? What is it actually doing? Is the cadmium still in the soil? What happens to it?
Yeah, so this also is part, I mean, this is still something that we're not, I mean, we've been collecting data on this, and we're working towards the analysis and the presentation of the results, but we're not there yet. Yeah, it's still in draft form, and we've got a way to go. But yeah, cadmium's quite reactive. It's quite volatile. It doesn't, you know, it's I'd say I need more time. I need more time and more data to answer that question.
Right. Actually, there was just something published out of China and Colorado on cadmium uptake that came across my desk today. So I'll try to add a few of those kind of papers as well, because, you know, it wasn't for cacao, but it was, I think, rice and cadmium. So I'm sure you've looked at multiple crops, because I think, was it you that told me that the regulations right now are for cacao, but in the future, they could impact a lot more crops?
Yeah, we think so. The avocado growers and the asparagus growers are all concerned about it, and there's limits there. They're less stringent than for cacao, but I mean, it's not going to be difficult for the European. It's not hard to imagine the European Union increasing these.
Yeah. So question from Serbia. It looks like the soil control is not fertile at all without any treatment, or is this a misinterpretation?
No, this is a great interpretation. It's not a part of it is just like years of what do you call it, neglect, or or very little investment in soil fertility management. But also, as mentioned, a part of it has to do with the variety of cacao that has been growing in the region. It's not your usual high yielding variety. It's a fine aroma. It's a different beast to the cacao that's grown in Africa, for example.
Has any work ever been done in trying to see if there's a taste difference when you include biochar?
No, not that I'm aware of.
I asked because I was in China a few years ago, and they were very focused on that for tomatoes, and you could actually, in my opinion, tell the difference. So I'd be curious with cacao. A question on whether the size of the biochar matters.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, we're talking about micro application rates. So you want to increase its surface area so there's more contact with the soil. I think I think this is important. I mean, I don't have any data to give a definitive answer, but my gut feeling is that it's important.
So powder.
Yeah, I'd say at least I'd say what we've been doing is running it through a 4mm mesh. But I would also say it would depend on the application. So if you were interested in water retention capacity, maybe some larger particles, where the pyrolized small branches of the plant, retain their vascular structure, maybe this would be beneficial. Mm-hmm. But I don't have any. I haven't got any data that I've personally generated on that.
Mm-hmm. Have you tried using cacao waste, the pod, as a feedstock for biochar?
Yeah, so yeah, most definitely. I've been up to the north, and I've taken contikis up there, and I've with the cooperative up there. I've taught them how to, how to produce their own biochar. But I mean, it's not enough. I mean, the amount of biochar needed to resolve this problem at the country level, I mean, it just dwarfs what's possible. The other problem you've got with producing biochar in the countryside is that you've got no control. I mean, like this, the feedstock's contaminated with cadmium before you even start, and then you've got no control over the use of the insecticides and these types of compounds. So yeah, I think it's better that it's done, you know, on the fringe of mega cities or large cities where you've got big waste streams, and yeah, you can have more. I mean, you've got a possibility of investing in a more expensive closed reactor that produces biochar with less emissions than a Kentucky. For a large number of reasons, I think it's, you know, the majority of the biochar production has got to be linked to waste management in cities.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about your own production capability there and how you're scaling it up? We were talking about that a little while ago.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been hard as well. I mean, it's you know, to begin with, there's no real confidence in there was no real confidence in biochar among potential end users. So it's taken us a really long time, you know, to get to the point where we could feasibly process a large amount of waste to produce biochar. So yeah, and then so meanwhile this is going on. I mean, you've got, you know, you've got money invested in infrastructure and personnel, and it's hard. It's been hard work. It's really, I mean, it's not.
Yeah. Question as to whether you've considered using the air spade that you may know Carbon Gold uses this to get the biochar into the root zone.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's not, let's say, probably an appropriate technology for rural farmers. But if they had a co-op, they might have one. Is a reduction in the beans to 5 ppm enough, or is there more research to do?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a good point. The distribution of cadmium in Peruvian soils is extremely heterogeneous. I mean, and you can see that a little bit on the map. But I mean, even when you get to the field scale, I mean, there's variation. It might. I mean, yeah, the biochar is not magic. I mean, we're talking about a 50 to 80% reduction in the absorption of cadmium. So once cadmium levels get beyond 1.6 ppm, biochar is not going to solve the problem. I mean, yeah. I mean, but there is very large extensions of land that have these moderate levels of cadmium contamination, and in that, I mean, we're talking about maybe 100,000 hectares just in Cacao, you know, where biochar we could basically, you know, it could be used to good effect. But I mean, there are instances where cadmium levels are extremely high. I mean, these areas we've got to just, you know, abandon agriculture, I think, and revert to national park, or, you know, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's got to be a more radical solution.
Yeah. Have you looked at whether the biochar is immobilizing any other heavy metals like mercury or lead? Or
No, we haven't. In truth, we haven't. This is, you know, here in Peru, we've also got a problem with mercury in in a region called Madre de Dios, and it would be interesting to expand the work we do to that region, but we haven't had time.
Mm-hmm. Question on the biochar plus 100% fertilizer. What does that mean? Can you give the composition?
Yeah, so I mean, when you grow any crop, I mean, when you harvest the grain, you're extracting nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium. So what we've done, I mean, what the fertilizer company has done is just worked out, you know, basically, you know, they've looked at the yield and they've worked out basically how much nutrient is being extracted every year with harvest, and then based on that, they've given a recommendation for the amount of chemical fertilizer that needs to be applied per hectare. So, you know, from memory, it's like if we're talking about NPK, it's something like 300 kilograms per hectare needs to be applied to a cacao orchard. So when we say 100% fertilizer, this is basically what we're talking about: 300 kilograms per hectare of NPK.
Did Corona have any impact on the supply for chemical fertilizer? I've heard that in other countries in South America, it was hard to come by.
Yeah, the price has gone up a little bit. I don't have a definitive answer for you. Probably. I mean, but yeah, I'm not. Yeah, we import a lot of fertilizer here, so I guess like the rest of the economy, there's been logistical bottlenecks with fertilizer as well.
Mm-hmm. So biochar could help them become more resilient in you know, the event that it is hard to come by. A question: have you done any experiments by preparing the soil with biochar admixture before planting new trees?
Yes.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah. Well, so they're not finished yet. They're you know, I mean, we've in the north, very close to that experiment I've just described. Biodiversity has established a new cacao experiment. In that experiment, they've got different genetic strains of cacao, and they've got different levels of biochar application. But I mean, it takes time. These experiments take time, and we don't have results yet, but they're coming.
Yeah, I know Lucas van Zwieten has done some work with coffee trees, and at least in one trial found that they were getting into production quicker, which would also be a strong selling point, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
What is the effect of the dosing rate in the reduction of cadmium? How does 60 kilograms per tree differ from 1 kilogram per tree?
Yeah, so yeah, as I mentioned, I can only just reiterate what I've already said. When we applied these massive application rates, the only viable way was to top dress the soil, because you can't dig. I mean, the cooperatives with whom we're working, we're interested in in applying the biochar to already established orchards. They're interested in protecting the investment that they've already made in establishing those orchards. So we put in massive application rates, but it was only possible to top dress. When we applied micro doses, we were able to dig it directly into the soil. And so, I mean, this is what we think is going on. We think with time, these massive applications are going to have great effects, but it takes time for the biochar to leach into the soil profile and incorporate fully. So in the short term, yeah, what's the name? The only viable way to get a quick response is to dig it into the soil and micro applications. And I think anyway, this is, from an economic perspective, this is the way to go, because applying 1 kilo of biochar per tree is cheap, relatively cheap. I mean, and you can recoup that investment across a single crop cycle. When you're talking about application rates of 7 or 30 or 60 kilograms per tree, it's going to take years to recoup this investment. It's just not economically viable in a business sort of context.
Yeah, agreed. Have you ever tried to use the biochar as a standalone growing medium or as a starter for the seedlings? And if so, what effect did it have?
No, but this is something that we're going to do in the very near future. Here in Peru, we import a lot of peat from Czechoslovakia, and so the idea is, I mean, to grow things like blueberries in shade houses. So the idea is to produce biochar as a replacement for peat, which would be good for the environment, good for our import-export balance sheet, and yeah, resilience, the resilience thing you were talking about before. You know, I mean, if we don't have to import it, we're not going to be at the end of these long supply chains, which is hopefully going to make us more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to plant a new plantation with new trees, how much biochar would you add to the soil, and how would you do it?
Like from an economic perspective, or
and I think just an application. How do you physically just dig the hole and put a liter of biochar stuff in there, or what would you do?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, here in my own personal orchard, I apply enormous rates of biochar. It's, you know, yeah, I don't know, it's like, yeah, big rates. But I mean, if you were talking about establishing a commercial operation, I think it would depend on the soil type. I mean, if you've got a good soil with lots of organic matter in it, I would recommend this strategy where you're just adding the biochar in micro doses with the existing organic or chemical fertilizers that you're going to use, and just like a kilo per tree per year. If you were thinking, I mean, here in Peru we've got a lot of desert soil, sandy soil. I mean, the advantage of this land is it's cheap if you've got access to groundwater. Yeah, I would suggest larger application rates. So it depends really on the context, and you know what is the, you know, what are you trying to achieve with a biochar application?
Yeah, speaking of desert, I think in one of your earlier slides was a picture of your yard in which you have really reclaimed the desert using biochar. Was that right?
Yeah, most definitely. The soil here is full of biochar.
Caroline, can you page back a few to the early slides, and we'll see if we can find that. In the meantime, I'll ask you the next question. Will this be a one-time application of biochar, or will you keep adding? I think you've already answered that one, but like, do you see an end point, or is that just going to be the new standard operating procedure to combine biochar and chemical fertilizer?
Yeah, I think yeah, the latter. Yeah, the idea, because you're talking about micro application rates, we can just keep doing it forever. You know, just reduce the rate of chemical fertilizer application, and just keep doing it.
Yeah. Have you been able to characterize different biochars, for example, pore size, to see if that makes a difference?
No, we haven't done that.
Okay. Somebody wants your email so they can ask questions. I think we'll have that if it wasn't in your slide deck. Are neighboring farmers beginning to use biochar yet? Can they afford it?
Sorry, whereabouts? Neighboring what? Neighboring
cacao farmers, from where you piloted it.
Yeah. So cacao's, it's I mean, economically, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of like poor farmers involved in the cultivation of this crop, but then you've got people aggregating it and commercializing it in Europe, and I don't think it's clear who's going to pay for the remediation of these soils. And then on top of that, you've got, I mean, we've got data that suggests that the cadmium problem's a legacy of, you know, of mining done badly in the past. I mean, it's coming in with the groundwater, and this is something that's, I think, still, as a country, as an industry, we're trying to define here in Peru.
Yeah, and this is where carbon finance revenues would probably be very helpful to get that moving forward. Brenton, I don't know if that's right there near the swimming pool. This used to be a desert, if I remember our conversation, and now it's really lush.
Yeah, you can see it in the slide before how it used to be. You go back one. Yeah, that's how it looked at the beginning.
And how much biochar would you say you've put in your yard?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, because we produce it here. There's been no limit on it really. Huh? I've been a bit greedy with my biochar application in my own garden, I must confess.
Someone may note that they have read a paper suggesting that cow manure biochar has the biggest affinity to cadmium, even more so than activated charcoal. Have you tested anything like that? I know it's harder to make manure from biochar from manure, but
yeah, I'd refer the person who yeah, in that article that I've shared the link to in the chat, yeah, everything that I've got to say about like biochar formulation for heavy metal immobilization is there. Yeah, I don't think, you know, I don't think we should limit ourselves to one feedstock or another. I mean, you know, in different places, in different contexts, there's different types of potential feedstocks, different volumes of it. You know, we need to be a little bit more flexible, I think, in terms of what we're recommending for biochar production.
Yeah, agreed. There were a couple of questions related to what the source of the cadmium is. Is it natural, or has it been introduced from chemical fertilizer or the mining industry? And is anything being done to curtail that?
Yeah. So it comes from mining. The data we've got demonstrates it unequivocally. It's coming in with the groundwater. So yeah, in the Andes, yeah, there's a lot of minerals. There's not much regulation, and so yeah, they're digging up these deposits of copper and gold and liberating these sediments full of cadmium at the same time. So we've used ion exchange membranes to passively sample the irrigation water, and that's where it's coming from. I mean, there are other sources. You know, the rock phosphate deposits have got a little bit. The guano de isla, the seabird guano that's used as an organic fertilizer here is quite high in cadmium, because basically we're using the sea as a recipient for all of our waste. So this guano de isla is not ideal. It's like, might be like 40 parts per million cadmium. But in the main, it's a legacy of mining done bad, and no, we're not doing anything about it yet, unfortunately.
Yep, it all costs money. Clay Gordon is suggesting the Cacao of Excellence program out of Bioversity and CIAT would be a good home for the impact of the use of biochar in cacao farming. Are you connected with any of those kinds of organizations?
Yeah. And like Rachel and Everett work for Bioversity International. So yeah, I mean, basically what happened is 3 years ago, I won this grant from Innovate to work on this problem. At the same time, they won a separate grant. There was another group at another university, and we decided at that point, when we all had, you know, new grants, that instead of everyone doing their own little thing, that we'd join forces and synergize. And so that's basically what we did. I mean, all of this work that I've just described has been done in collaboration with Rachel Atkinson and Everett Thomas from Biodiversity International.
Do you see them as now convinced that biochar is the way to go, and are they planning on, you know, doing this elsewhere?
It is being done elsewhere, where the verification in the field is being expanded to all of the other cadmium affected areas in Peru for cacao cultivation. We're in the process of doing this. We've even got new data that I haven't presented today, which show, you know, like where we've replicated the results that we obtained in Peru in another place. So yeah.
Someone would like to know, see if you could explain the difference between micro application, how that works, versus top dressing.
Sure. So with micro application, what we're doing is we're basically we're taking like a kilo of biochar and a chemical fertilizer mixture, mixing it up, you know, so it's a mixture, and then the farmers go in with a crowbar. I forgot what they call them. Yeah, crowbar. Yeah, I think that's the word in English. I'm losing my English. So yeah, they go in, they make a little hole, you know, which is maybe I don't know, 4 centimeters in diameter, 4 centimeters in depth. They make a little hole with a crowbar and they drop the chemical fertilizer biochar mixture into that hole and they close it back up. With top dressing, with these massive application rates that I showed in some of the photos, you just peel back the leaf litter and you put 30 kilograms, 60 kilograms of biochar on top of the soil around the tree, and then you put the leaf litter back over the top. So the biochar ends up sitting on the top of the soil in a separate layer, and it's going to take time to dissolve into the soil profile. With the other way, with the micro application rate, it's instantaneous.
Can you say more about the Contiki in the earth technology versus metal Contikis? And I want to add on to that question. When I was there, I saw the native Indian technology for cooking, which I think was called pachamanca, and to me it looked just like a soil Contiki.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we haven't had a lot of this success in Peru with these Contikis in the ground. I think it's a great idea because it's cheap and I mean, if you put a metal oven out in the jungle, it's just going to rust quickly. You know, it's only going to last a year, so it's going to be fairly expensive in terms of what the small scale farmer can afford out in the Peruvian jungle. The problem with the Contiki in the ground is that getting the biochar out of it is complicated. I mean, you know, it's a lot of work to first of all dig the hole, and then when you finish the burn, someone's got to jump in the hole with a shovel and shovel it out. It's a lot of work. And so what agriculture in Peru, when you're talking about these smallholder farmers, I mean, the money that they make from farming their 1 hectare lots is minimal. What most people do is they do farm these 1 hectare lots, but they're not investing a lot in the maintenance of soil fertility and in improving, you know, their productive capacity. The working age people off farm, you know, driving taxis, getting a salary, you know, in every month so that they can pay for their kids' school, for healthcare, etc., etc. And who's left on the farm is, you know, like the grandparents, you know, that are basically doing it like a caretaker role. We haven't seen much interest. I mean, although we've tried, you know, we haven't seen a massive uptake of, you know, this strategy of making your own ovens in the earth, unfortunately. And I think this is just, you know, it's a result or a consequence of the economic bet hedging strategy that poor farmers use in Peru.
Do you think there's potential for introducing some of the charcoal making cook stoves in this area, or is that just not culturally something they would adopt?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've tried. We tried with all of that. We were at it for a good couple of years. You know, we manufactured prototypes of ovens that, you know, that reduce wood consumption, that produce biochar as a byproduct. Yeah, we produced a whole heap of them. We took them out into the Peruvian jungle. We gave them away. We ran workshops. But at the end of the day, the people just don't like them. They just, you know, I mean, they're used to these traditional fogatas that they use, where you've got 2 rows of bricks or clay, and then you've got like straps of metal across the top, and your pots just go straight on the top of that. These ovens are really efficient in terms of they're very quick. They're easy to cook with. The women that cook with them, yeah, they can cook quickly, and they can also control like the temperature, like the size of the fire really easily. So all of these things are a lot more complicated with with the cook stoves, with the improved cook stoves. They're not really improved because the people don't like them. Maybe we should call them unimproved.
Yeah, the adoption of those is so specific to different cultures. A question on if you know what the chemical form of the cadmium is in the soil.
No.
That was David Wayne, our fellow board member, so maybe you two can discuss that later. So was a decrease in soil cadmium measured due to adsorption, or was uptake just decreased?
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, we've been working on this. I need more time to give a definitive answer to this. Yeah, we're working towards this. This is not such a straightforward question. Complicated it is.
I was specifically responding to the question of organoleptic evaluation of the impact of biochar and the taste of chocolate made with cacao. Do you understand that question? I'm not sure I do.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay. Clay, if you could specify that, that would be really helpful. Any ideas why the local farmers have not been picking up on biochar, even with the good economics, as you mentioned?
Yeah, so just like I said, you know, the small scale farmers, they've got their backs to the wall economically, and so most of them, I mean, they might have a small farm, a 1 hectare plot, you know, but they're economically, they're adopting a risk aversion strategy. They're working off farmers, you know, as laborers or taxi drivers or whatever, you know, so that every month they're getting like a small salary. And I mean, they'll look after their orchard of cacao, but they're not investing lots of money in soil fertility management or, you know, improving irrigation or anything like that. They're just, you know, they'll invest the minimum, because I mean, when you think about it, I mean, in agriculture, anything could go wrong. There could be a drought, there could be a flood, there could be an insect outbreak, there could be a, you know, like the example of the coffee and the fungal outbreak of La Roya, you know, the fungal infection we had a few years back. I mean, anything could go wrong. So it doesn't really make sense for someone up against the wall economically to invest a lot of money in their crop when it might not come off, and when they don't, you know, when they're struggling, you know, to afford basics like education and, you know, decent nutrition and healthcare and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, it's like the farm, the chakra is operated with minimal investment, and if it comes off, good. If it doesn't come off, no problem, because they've got this other abusive, you know, salary from somewhere else, where at least they've got, you know, the money to pay their monthly bills.
Yep. Well, we have our work cut out for us, don't we? I think that's all the questions I have at the moment. So unless anyone has any additional questions, I think you get the record, Brenton, for the most questions asked, to be honest with you.
Is that good or bad?
Yeah, I want to thank you for sharing that. Obviously, this is a critical area, in my opinion, in terms of how biochar can really help with food security. So I mentioned last month that I'm in the process of building my new house. So I'm going to be taking at least a month off from hosting webinars so I can focus on that. But we will be back in the fall with a few more webinars and hopefully an investor forum. Just to wrap up, I know it's a little early, but you should be receiving a short survey related to today's webinar. And if you fill that out, it really helps us to know how we're doing and plan for future topics. So I just want to say thanks again, Brenton, and to all of you for tuning in today and for your continued support of IBI. We hope you'll take what you learned today and tell others about it, or maybe even try it yourself. So enjoy the rest of the summer for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, we're still live, or has everyone gone, Kathleen?
I was just asking Caroline if she could close out. Caroline?
Hi, Kathleen. I'm locked out, and I tried to end the webinar myself, but it's not letting me. If you can try, that'd be great.
Okay.
I don't have access to my work computer any longer, unfortunately.
Oh, you might have to walk me through it.
Just hit the X in the panel, and then it'll say end webinar for all.
Okay.